gratitude to the Tempus Foundation and to the Department for Higher Education, and particularly to Darko Milogoric and Tatjana Stankovic. And I told all of you that their help, competent and very willful assistance from the beginning really was crucial for me, the beginner in this job of applying for such a huge and complex project. So now we are proceeding with the very important session, especially for our consortium members, teams and contact persons. Tanya will give us all and them relevant information, and then we will also have the time for questions. Before I give them the floor, I just want to remind our guests and our guests from all universities and the organizational board of our faculty. And in person, I will also remind the others later on that we have the dinner at Madeira restaurant besides our faculty, 15 or 100 meters to the right from the entrance exit, right or left, depending on whether you consider that as exit or entrance, at 8 o'clock. Okay. So, Tanya? 7. I didn't know. So it's even better, because we will work until 6 and something, and at 7 o'clock we will go. We will be hungry and tired, and that's perfect. Thank you, Zara.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to Professor Vujadinovic. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. I would be remiss, although Tatjana is the star of today's session, actually, regarding the presentation, and she is the project officer who is in charge of this project. I just wanted to say how pleased I am to be here today, and also how pleased I am personally also that this project has been was selected for funding, especially because the Professor Vujadinovic and myself were working together on the preparation of this thesis, on this project. And I think it's a lovely project idea and well thought out project also. And I have no doubt that, judging on our past experience and working together, that this project will be a good one and will even be maybe a best practice example in future years. So without further ado, I give the word to my colleague, Tatjana Stankovic. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vujadinovic. Thank you, Darko. I would like to also greet all of you. Good afternoon from my side as well. As mentioned, I'm a project officer in charge for your projects. My name is Tatjana Stankovic, and it is my pleasure to be here today together with Darko, who is the coordinator of our unit for higher education. We will be supporting your project team throughout the process, and we are actually here today to present you what is our role in the process during these 3 years, but also to present you what are some obligations and responsibilities that you have from your side regarding reporting process towards us, etc. But just to begin with, I would once again like to congratulate you for the success. We really had several very good shortlisted projects at the selection process, but I'm very glad that this project was ranked by our evaluator as the top one. So also I'm very sure that this best practice will continue throughout the following 3 years, and I wish you a lot of success in it. Regarding the presentation, our plan is to give you some basic facts based on our experience of monitoring the project, some, let's say, basic highlights for good project management. Also, we will tell you something about reports and monitoring, and then we will reflect upon some questions regarding finances. We are sure that you're interested about that section as well. And since we have a decent time slot today, I think 1 hour and 20 minutes, we decided to enrich a little bit our presentation with some additional slides. So it may not be a 20 minutes presentation, maybe some 40 minutes, but we tried to anticipate some of your questions based on our previous communication, and also based on the questions that we received from our current or previous projects. So hopefully we'll give you some insights through the presentation, but also we will have additional, maybe half an hour for your additional questions and answers. So without further ado, we will start with project management and some advice on that. But before I start, I would like to ask you if you could maybe just raise your hand if you are experienced or maybe already have participated in strategic partnership project. Are there any persons here which are maybe part of consortium before? Okay, if not, then it is good that we took this approach because we will try to give you some basic information as well. So when it comes to all the projects that we follow, we always recommend that not only coordinator, but all the partners get familiarized with, let's say, regulatory framework for the implementation at the beginning of the project. You should be aware about the Erasmus Plus program rules. But also, you should have in mind that national agencies which are responsible for implementation of Erasmus Plus program in the country also can have some additional rules which may differ from country to country. So our practice here might differ from a little bit from the practice in national agencies, for example, in Germany or Sweden, etc. So this is why you have all the contractual documents really extensive to see all the details that we request from our side. And also, you should be familiarized with the project application, and actually not only application, but the project as approved. So you are probably aware that even though your project was really well scored, the evaluators detected some shortcomings and gave some suggestions and cut off some parts of the budget. So actually, you should always refer to the documentation which will be presented at the following slides, which is approved. Then we would like to advise a good planning well in advance. So this is quite ambitious project, and it's 3 years, almost 3 years lasting. So it is very good to see that, for example, today's kickoff meeting is not used just to meet and greet, but also to plan some future activities. So this is great approach, and to work on some future activities. So we just advise that you continue with this practice. Again, the clear division of the tasks and responsibilities of all the partners from the beginning is crucial. So you will have also partnership agreements. I'm informed that it is in the process of signing. So I also am very glad to say that to convey to you that the University of Belgrade is quite experienced in these projects, and that you received one template of the partnership agreement which is already, let's say, tested and tried in numerous projects. So you can enrich it if you want, but in this document it is advisable to have clear division of the task for each and every partner. And also regarding the responsibilities on the individual level, we would certainly advise that you make project teams at the beginning. It is something, well, if I would just make a little bit of digression. You are probably familiar that in these projects you have 4 types of possible engagement of staff. So researchers and teachers, managers, administrative staff, and technical staff. We really warmly advise that you have each category of staff involved. And here we always stress that in these projects, the role and actually division of these tasks is not based on the position of the person at the institution, at the university, but it is based on their role and position at the project. So for example, you can have a professor or even assistant who can have managing tasks. Also, some people from the management can have some administrative tasks if the need arises, etc. So it is up to you to decide. But I know that we are aware that you plan a lot of research activities and that you will have a lot of teachers involved. But you will see that administrative part can be burdening as the time passes. So it is our advice to have at least one person to support you regarding administrative tasks and technical tasks as well. As for your mutual communication, again, it is up to you to decide modalities of your communication, but we would always advise to keep your coordinator informed about everything, and that the coordinator keeps you informed about all the processes, that you have established and transparent decision-making procedures. So it is our advice to, and I think it is the plan, to establish some kind of managing body at the project level, so some kind of steering committee, so to just have it in writing who are the members, and to make it transparent, all the decisions throughout the project to all the project partners. And also, since you are tackling the teaching process in the best interest of students as well, we would advise to maybe include even students in these processes of decision making. It is a suggestion to think about. When it comes to your communication, just always have in mind this problem-solving approach. So you will certainly have some challenges throughout these 3 years, or maybe some obstacles, but just try to keep in mind that it is not who to blame, but how to solve the problem. And of course, we will be here to assist you if the need arises. These things regarding the decision-making processes, risk assessment, mutual communication at internal project level might be defined also in some kind of a document. And we are glad to see that the coordinator today, Professor Vujadinovic, will present you well, some kind of internal document that you will use with the delegation of tasks. So it is very good to have some kind of project management plan, which is let's say, maybe more detailed than what you have defined in your already detailed partnership agreement. But some kind of practical things you can define there. How you will communicate, how often you will have meetings, how often you will have reporting towards each other, and things like that. And then again, we would advise that from the beginning of the project, you keep your institutional authorities informed about the project activities. So always keep in mind that you need support at the university level, not only at the faculty level. So Erasmus Plus project recognize faculties as the constituent part of the umbrella organization, let's say, which is the university. So actually the directors will have to actually validate all the results. So based on our experience, it can be challenging if you do a lot of work and then at the end you present them to your management boards, and then it can take some time for them to grasp it, to just accept it as integral parts of the processes. So keep them informed in time. And if relevant, some national authorities in your countries. And at the end, the certainly important part of these projects, except for the core activities, are dissemination activities. So this is something that you do in order to spread the news about your projects to the surrounding community. So it is well, we would like that this project is not closed within the doors of one department or the faculty. So it is necessary to think about how to make it transferable maybe to other interested parties, how to inform so wider community about it, how to make it visible, etc. So it is always good to have some kind of dissemination plan going on, and to also disseminate the results not only at the coordinating partner institution and the country, but in all the countries. And at the end, regarding what happens after the project, so please think about project sustainability from the beginning. So it is very important, and it's in all our best interest to have the results kept even after the funding by the NA is finished. So think about how to sustain your results, how to provide financial support, etc. And we're very glad that actually some things, some issues on sustainability were already tackled in the application form. So I know that you have the plans to apply for Erasmus Mundus joint degrees, etc. So this is something to think about from the beginning. And now I mentioned that you should be aware of the documentation that might be very useful to you. So regarding the program rules, you have Erasmus Plus Program Guide. This is a very extensive document. Don't be afraid, you do not have to read it all. It's more than 300 pages, but you go to the section dedicated to strategic partnerships and you have all the details there regarding the rules of the program. And then regarding the implementation at the level of national agency and rules of the national agency, we are very glad that Professor Vujadinovic made some efforts to translate all the documents regarding the contracts and the annexes. So maybe you already got the grant agreement signed by the national agency and the coordinating institution. This is the most important document. And then it has several annexes. For example, the second annex is the budget as approved. So always when you want to see how many days you have approved, how many funds, you go to this Annex 2 table. This is what is approved. And also the application form as well, where you always refer to what you promised in the application regarding the activities. And then you have annexes 3 and 4, which is quite detailed on financial rules. So there you can see all the budget lines, the rates that you can use, etc. And you have number 5, annex number 5, which are actually your mandates that your legal representatives signed. So it is good to have it all. Now you will, of course, have partnership agreement with your coordinator. This is something bilaterally signed by the coordinator and the partner. So it is maybe a crucial document for you at the institutional level. And also, which you can maybe use for the reference purposes, is the template that is in English language that is currently available at a beneficiary space, which can be assessed by the coordinator. It is the interim report. So reporting phase is not closed. It is up to the half of the project. But this document can be useful just to see what will be evaluated when the reporting time comes. What are some, let's say, pressure points that we will like to investigate in the reporting phase regarding your project? Some advice on good practices examples on the previous projects, what served well to our beneficiaries. So we always advise very detailed partnership agreement and precise. When it comes to communication, of course, it's up to you to see how you will communicate. I'm aware that you already use a mailing list of the project, etc. But perhaps you can consider using some online tools which are quite user-friendly and free to use. For example, you could use Trello platform. This is something that is not obligatory, but it is maybe some good practice. Trello platform is partially free to use, and it can be used to delegating the task by the coordinator, to giving the feedback, to follow the progress of the activities and things like that. Then again, for storing, for archiving the documents, and also for assessing and editing the documents at the same time by several people, several sites, you can use maybe Google Drive, Google Documents. I'm sure that you will have a lot of iteration of the documents when it comes to development of curriculum, so it can be useful. Maybe Doodle platform, Doodle polls can be used when you do some voting, decision making, or maybe when you want to establish the date for some meeting or things like that. So these are some tools which you can consider. We will talk about finances later on, but as you already might know, the majority of the project budget is based on the unit costs. So these are some rates that you have available to use, and the reporting towards the national agency will be, so for majority of the expenses in terms of these unit costs. So you will report how many unit costs you have used. But in reality, these unit costs will probably differ from the exact amount of money that you have to spend for certain ticket or airplane ticket or activity or something like that. So we advise to devise some kind of cash flow table maybe let's say two cash flow tables, so you can track down whether you have some kind of savings in reality that you can maybe use for the purposes of the project, maybe to fund some additional activity. And at the end, it is always good to have agreed on the consortium level the way how to fill in the documents that you will have to fill in. So there, for example, I suppose you already got the template of timesheets. This is something that we recommend filling in this form, but it's just a suggestion. You can also devise another one. But it is very important when you devise a timesheet or some kind of mutual document to be clear on how to fill it in at the consortium level. So maybe it would be a good practice to give some kind of clear instruction, for example, as the annex on the mentioned project management plan, or maybe not the guidelines, but maybe the example of well filled in document would be a good idea, just to not make confusion in reporting, because it can have, let's say, financial impact when in reporting the costs. Also, we advise that you have regular internal monitoring to have established procedure for monitoring between coordinator and the partners. You will see as the time passes by, the documentation will pile up, and we really do not advise that you wait the first reporting period towards the NA. So at least quarterly, and I think this is the plan from the application, at least quarterly try to give some kind of feedback and supporting documentation, which is very important to your coordinator. And also, I would like to stress that the national agency will always evaluate your results in terms of what has been, so we will compare what has been promised in the project application and what has been done. So actually you will see at the later slides the justification of the cost that you will spend, many of them, will be based on the quality of your results. And of course, we are not experts in your academic field, but we will do this kind of comparison. So for example, if you planned in the approved project to have some kind of analysis tackling this and that and having, let's say, 50 pages, but if we see at the end 10 pages with some graphs on it only, so of course it would be questionable whether the amount of days was reasonable or justified. So we're sure that this will not happen, but just to know that we will evaluate this. So maybe it is a good idea to make some kind of mechanism for internal evaluation about its timeliness and about the quality. And also we are very glad to know that you included several associated partners in your consortium. Yeah, all right, yeah. But they can be useful. They maybe can give you some kind of feedback to the draft versions of your documents that you produce, to your results, or maybe to participate in some other kind that you can devise, but try to involve external and internal evaluation to your project results, just to make them the most efficient and useful as possible. Also, regarding the transfer of the funds, we always advise that partner institution has some kind of account which is separately dedicated for this project. So this is not something that we can impose as a rule, of course, but it's in your best interest maybe to have a separate sub-account or account for this purpose, so you can track down the expenses for these projects more easily. So now monitoring. National Agency Foundation Tempus will be responsible for performing monitoring of your project. We do this, well, in several ways. There is this continual process of monitoring that we call the desk monitoring. This is us actually checking upon the beneficiary space and mobility tool that has to be filled in by the coordinator. So we really just would like to advise and to ask you to cooperate continually with the coordinator in that sense, because from time to time we will check what is new at your beneficiary space and mobility tool. Also, we will check the news at the website of the project, and we are very glad to see that it is already established. It's very good news. And again, we can maybe schedule some kind of meeting with coordinator if the need arises, if there is something which is not clear, etc. But the most important monitoring point is the monitoring visit that we will have. This will be the official visit to the coordinating institution. It will be announced well in advance. The coordinator will be asked to inform us about the project progress, about the results, etc., and maybe to show us some kind of supporting documents. But it will not be a surprise. We will announce it, and then. It is not our aim just to monitor and control the project, but also to help you and to advise you in time. So after this monitoring visit, we will give you a detailed feedback about our conclusions about the visit, about some recommendations maybe. So we will ask the coordinator to share it with all of you and maybe to just anticipate some future obstacles. At last, so yeah, we can have some phone checks, but it is not some kind of custom kind of monitoring. Other type of, let's say, monitoring the progress of the project is reporting. So during these 35 months, you will have to submit two reports. One is called interim report and one is called final report. These reports are important for us to just map what is the progress of the project activities, but also for you because these reports are actually used as a trigger to ask for following installment of the funds. So, first of all, this is the beginning of the project was in October. You have to submit the interim, actually the coordinator submits it, but you are all responsible to devise it. So the first report is up to 1/2 of the project. So it is at latest at the middle of the project. If I'm not mistaken, it is March 2021. So you have plenty of time. But at least this is the end point for submitting the interim report. And at this point, you should have used at least 70% of the first installment of funds at the consortium level. So as you might be aware, the first installment of funds was 40% of the entire approved amount of the budget. I'm speaking in terms of the entire budget. So of this 40%, at least 70% has to be used until until the middle of the project. It is usually the case. You don't probably you will not worry about that. If it happens actually that you use 70% of the first installment before, it is not a problem. You can also submit this interim report before the middle of the project. So this is the first checking point. If the report is well evaluated and accepted, you will have the second installment of the funds, which is again 40% of the budget. And the last 20, what about last 20% of the budget? Well, it is something that is paid after validation of the final report. So final report is something that you submit, that the coordinator submits after the end of the project. The maximum is 60 calendar days after the project's finished. So it is October 2022. This is the end day for the final report, and when it is evaluated, you get the last remaining 20% of the funds. So just this is important just to have in mind that some part of activities will have to be pre-financed by your institution, some smaller portion of activities, but this is just a mechanism by our side to make sure that all activities are completed correctly. So this is about the reporting. And maybe you want to know what is actually the procedure for assessing it. So you have, and I'm sorry, some part of the text, we have different formats of presentation, so some text skipped a little bit down there, but of course, you will have this presentation. Okay, thank you, thank you. But I will say it anyhow. So you will have your final report evaluated by the national agency, but also will have external experts involved in the evaluation, and we have predefined criteria, the guide for external assessors. So it is not ad hoc; it is according to well-defined criteria. And when you refer to the program guide, you can also see what were the criteria for approving your project, and it is quite similar to this. We will investigate the quality, the timeliness, the cooperation between the partners, the prospects of sustainability, etc. So if the project final report is assessed with more than 50 points out of 100 points, it is okay. If the number of points is below 50, well, it's not okay, because it can happen that you have to return at the consortium level some part of the budget. So 25% can be reduced if the project final report is assessed between 40 and 49 points. 50% of the budget can be reduced if the final report has between 25 and 39 points, and even 75% of the budget can be returned if it's so bad that that it is less than 25 points. This is not something that usually happens. I think that it's not really something to worry about, but just have in mind that we will assess the results, and also what can happen is that you have good results but bad quality of the reports. So just there were some projects that unfortunately did not present properly what they actually did. So think about the quality of the results, but also the quality of making it visible through your report. And maybe here I will mention what is actually one more precondition to have the final installment of the funds, and that is uploading the final versions of your outputs, of your results, to the Erasmus Plus project results platform. This is something that will be assessed by the coordinator, and it is just a condition to until the date of submission of your final report, you also upload your main results, your intellectual outputs, to the European platform. And this is also not just to control the project, but this is good dissemination platform, because this is the place where all the projects are announced and, let's say, advertised, so you can also be additionally visible through this platform at the international level. What is also the obligation of the coordinator is to use the platform's mobility tool and the beneficiary space. These are the platforms through which the coordinator reports continually about the news at the project, about meetings going on, about documents produced, etc. So please have in mind the obligation of the coordinator, and cooperate with the coordinator accordingly. And now we came to the financial side of the project. So, as mentioned before, there are two types of costs at the strategic partnership project. The first type are so-called unit costs, and this is actually the majority of the project budget lines. So, project management and implementation line, transnational project meetings, such as this one, intellectual outputs, multiplier events, promotional events, and learning, teaching, and training activities. All of these activities are funded in such a manner that you have predefined sums that you can use for certain activity. So I'll just give the example. For this meeting, you had per person 575 euros. Well, this is the flat rate, let's say, unit cost per person. Or, for example, for learning and teaching activities, you will have a predefined let's say 275 euros for a certain distance between two cities to cover your costs. Or you will have a daily rate of 106 euros per person per day. So this is something which is established at the program level and that your institutions have the right to use for certain activities. All these rates you have briefly outlined in the Annex 4 that you will get or maybe already got, but also you already got, great. And then if you need some additional explanation about these types of budget lines, you refer to the Erasmus Plus program guide where you have the table with all the explanations. So for these costs, we as a national agency do not go into checking what is the exact amount of money that you spend on certain airplane ticket or something like that. We just control what is the number of unit costs that you have been approved in the Annex 2 and what you used. So it is justified based on the results, actually, on the participation in the meeting, on production of the results, etc., not the receipts and the bills. We call it output-based budget lines. And on the other hand, you have real costs, such as exceptional costs. I believe that University of Saarland here has the budget line of exceptional costs for publishing the book. It's small amount of the budget, but just to have in mind that this kind of cost is actually based on the input, and we will ask you for this kind of cost to justify it with the receipt, with the contract, with payslip, etc. So when it comes to reporting, we, as you know, we transfer the funds in euro, and also when you report towards us, you always report in euros. So in case that you have other currency in your country, you have, well, when reporting towards us, to use established currency converter, or actually it is the course of euro, which is set by the European Commission. We give you here the link to assess it, so you can calculate the monthly rate when some cost is incurred. Yeah, of course.
The 575 euros, how they be calculated? Because that's the first time that I heard it. It's something like a lump sum for travel and
Yes, yes,
accommodation, because
yes.
usually it's the daily lounge and the
Yeah,
cost
yes,
is
yes,
calculated.
yes.
So
Yeah, this is actually the thing that we will not go into details how you distributed this, what is for the travel, what is for the subsistence costs. This is something that, as you mentioned, this is something that is defined separately. For example, for learning and teaching activities, you will have some amount for travel and some amount for subsistence. But here, for these kinds of meetings, you just get this unit cost and you can just use it. At the following slide, we gave you the examples of the documents that you use to justify these costs. So for this meeting, what we will look at is the agenda of the meeting, the list that you all signed, the photographs, the presentation, the minutes of the meeting. We will also take into account your tickets, your boarding passes, and your hotel receipts, but we will not actually look at the amounts on them. We just need them as a proof that a person was here in Belgrade in this particular time. We will see the dates on the tickets, on your accommodation receipts, etc. So we do not go into the distribution on the individual level for this cost. Also, for the intellectual outputs, for example, we will have to have signed timesheets. I will talk about timesheets later on. So some kind of document that testifies that certain person participates at work at certain intellectual output. But we will not go into details about the pay slips and the transfer to her or his individual account. What is important for us is that the person is contractually bound for intellectual output, that the person is contractually bound to the partner institution, that it is that it has timesheets approved, signed by the university management, testifying that the person was involved, and the most important, that we have produced outputs that you worked on. So this is something that we look at. Certificates of attendance at some meetings, travel warrants, these are some documents that you can collect for these purposes, for the unit costs. But on the other hand, when we have these real costs, as mentioned, then we will have to have, for example, contract with the subcontractor. We will have to have receipt or the invoice. We'll have to have bank statement for these costs. And this, we have one additional note. Well, these kind of checks for all of these documents, for the unit costs and for the real costs, are checked by our financial officers at the national agency. So they can check it in English language, but unfortunately they are not fluent in, I don't know, Italian, Swedish, etc. So we will have to ask you to provide the documents with the translations of at least key elements, if they're at your mother tongue, which is not English. So, of course, you do not need to have some kind of certified official translation of entire document, but please, and this is why you have the little pencil here, you can just do it in writing. It's enough for us. So just make visible what are the key elements of some financial documents that you send to us for checking, so that we know what we are looking at. All right, now we are aware that the project is alive and that you will have some needs during the project to maybe transfer some funds, so that everything will not necessarily be exactly as approved in the Annex 2. So you will have, or you already have, the grant agreement signed by the coordinator and the national agency. There you have a lot of details of possibilities for budgetary transfers, but we also gave you here part of the text. So it is possible to make transfers, of course, within one budget line. So, for example, for the intellectual output, you can make internal transfers between unit costs. And I will just mention that, well, in the previous months, we detected that there was some kind of mistake in the Annex 2, and it comes in handy here that we can solve it because we can actually transfer within one budget line the unit costs. You will just need to give us the explanation. We advise it to just give us in the form of a request for smaller change. We call it like that. This is some kind of formal information by the coordinator to us about this change. We approve it, and then you can continue. It does not, well, if it is up to 20% of one budget line, it is not necessary to make annex of the agreement. So even if it goes between the budget lines, you can make the transfer even between the budget lines. For example, you can transfer up to 20% from the budget line project management and implementation, or transnational project meeting, or intellectual output multiplier event, learning teaching activities. All these budget lines can be reduced, so up to 20%, to transfer it to some other budget line if you need. So except for the project management and exceptional costs. Unfortunately, these are stuck. So these are fixed amounts. But to all other budget lines, up to 20%, you can be free to make some transfers without annex of the agreement. If there is a need to make some larger transfers, then we will have to investigate upon the need for that, and if approved, to make the annex of the agreement. And also, if the need arises that you have some support for persons with special needs, you can inform us. And actually, in this case, even if you did not plan it in the application, you can have them, and even without this limitation of 20%. So this is the flexibility in your budget. Now we'll tell you maybe something that was unclear to our previous beneficiaries that you maybe might need to clarify with us. So about staff engagement. For a person to have allocated funds from the project budget for his or her work. As mentioned, the person has to be formally associated to have some kind of formal contract with the institution. You might know that you can include students to be your administrative associates at the project, but only if they have some kind of contractual obligation or are formally associated to your institution. In other case, they cannot be part. They can be voluntary part of the project, but they can receive the daily rates for this. You have to have the timesheet for every person which has allocated budget, which are signed, I also, again repeat, by the university management, not the faculty, but university management. Of course, that this person contributes to the intellectual output that can be checked and approved. And that is all. So regarding the further payments, from between the university and the faculty or between the team members, etc. This is not something that we investigate upon. And I stressed the usage of timesheets. You got the template from our side that we just designed to help you, but you can maybe change it if you want. But we tried to make it very informative, because in it we need to map for every person which is involved what is actually the category. So whether the person is taking over the management task or administrative task or both, it just has to be reported and distinguished in the timesheet. When you think about the reporting through the timesheets on the level of 1 day, you apply your national standard for the working day. So for example, in Serbia, it is 8 hours. But we take into account the national practice, which might differ for the working day. Now, please have in mind that work during these kinds of meetings is not something which is entered and declared within the timesheets. So the timesheets are used to justify the work at the intellectual outputs. To justify the daily allowances for that. But when it comes to participation and work at these meetings, you have another budget line. So transnational project meeting is funding actually your coming here and working here. So just avoid. Yes. Yeah. So there are no daily rates through the project for this in that sense. Well, this is actually something which is defined like travel and subsistence costs for the meeting. But these kinds of meetings are predominantly used for management issues, not so much for particular work at intellectual output. You will tackle it, of course, but it is expected that the majority of your work is actually done separately through these other days, right, that you actually can report through the timesheets only. Yes? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yes, yes, to validate it. Because the Erasmus Plus program recognizes the university as the partner. Yes, yes.
And then they send
The international
Office, yeah? All right. Yeah, yeah.
in our case, prorector for finances is
Yeah.
supposed to sign.
So,
Prorector, sorry,
Vice rector, yeah.
rector. Vice rector. In your case? Yes, in our case. Vice rector for
maybe in
financial
our case
affairs.
is a vice rector of international exchanges.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, of course. Yes, yes. And then you send them to the coordinator. The timesheets are collected by the coordinator, scanned, yeah. But also, please keep archives of original documents, because it can happen that you have some kind of revision. So just keep them at your own institutions, the originals. But to the coordinator, it is enough to scan it and to send it, and the coordinator will then upload it to the beneficiary space, and we will check it in electronic version. But yeah. Yeah.
Just to clarify then,
Yeah.
for the meetings, we can have no output from the project. So for our working time,
All right.
is that?
Well, these transnational project meetings are, by definition, dedicated to the project management, you know. So it is not expected that you have some particular specific outcome out of this meeting, right? You will tackle it, I presume. I saw that you have some guest lecture, for example, tomorrow, but this is something which is not obligatory, you know. So by the program rules, these meetings are primarily for the project management, but also, of course, it is inevitable to have some kind of discussions about the intellectual output, but from the side of managing the intellectual outputs in the future. But how you can fund this work is actually through the project management and implementation budget line, because the project implementation and management is the budget line which is, again, one fixed amount per month, but it is very flexible. And you can use it for dissemination, for project websites, etc., but also for the work at the entire project management. So this is one option to have funds for you because you were actually representing your project at the management level. But also, I would like to stress that you have, in your project application, you dedicated some specific unit costs, days, within the intellectual outputs, which are called administrative and management days. So in the intellectual outputs, actually, you were wise enough to not just budget the teachers, but also you budgeted management and administrative costs within them. But just please be aware that these two have to be distinguished. So if you want to justify, to claim the funds for overall project management, this goes from project management and implementation. And there we do not have to have timesheets and nothing. You will have, of course, the minutes of these meetings and all the documents that I mentioned that prove that you have been working at some managerial tasks. But on the other hand, if you have some task for managing an administration of particular intellectual output, you can just have funds for that through the budget line intellectual output. Take a look at the Annex 2, and you will see intellectual output, this and that, and you have administrative unit costs and management unit costs. It is just important that when it comes to your timesheet, you do not put the exact days of the meeting there. You see? Yeah, but you can refer to some other days during the month if you worked on the management and administration of intellectual outputs, but not particular days, because that would be the conflict, the double funding, let's say, of the same time. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
The lump sum of 575 euros for attending such a meeting, is that per person for the whole meeting, or is that per day? Probably the whole meeting.
It is per person,
Per person, but it's for the whole meeting.
Yeah.
So if it's 2 days or 3 days, of course it doesn't matter. It's always 5%.
Yeah. Yeah. This is something that you can find in the Erasmus Plus program guide and your contractual documentation. Yeah, and this is why these meetings are actually usually they are very short. So yeah. Unfortunately not. This is something. Yeah, but unfortunately, this is something, well, this is a co-funded by the European Union, you know. So there are some kind of costs that when you take into account the nature of the program, has to be co-funded. But on the other hand, there is a flexibility that I mentioned about the unit costs. So for some other, maybe travel, you will have savings. So this is something which is allowed to transfer, you know. So maybe you will not have savings for this, but maybe for some learning and teaching activities, or I believe that you will have the place to maybe compensate for this. So this is a program rule. The program is established 7 years ago, and this is something that is actually rule for all the countries and institutions participating at the European level. Or this is not something prescribed by the national agency. So we have to follow it, yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, okay, if there, yeah.
If we have two colleagues that are working, imagine we two preparing the syllabus in labor law, and we dedicated 2-3 days, don't mind. We have to put in the sheet,
Yeah.
have dedicated 3 days.
Yeah.
That means that cost. Even we are online having the communication and the meetings. We are working online, but we put each of us the days that we dedicated.
Yeah, yeah, but your work,
How we justify
this time that you use for your meetings,
Yeah.
but the meeting can be, yeah, it can be referred to as managing unit costs for the intellectual output, right? So you can have this possibility to put it in the timesheet, just as the management for this particular output.
But it's a particular work, not managing.
Particular work, yeah, but just not to make the confusion, your internal meetings that you do online, that you do regularly, it's not something that we even know of. We are not aware of it, so we do not see it. It's your work, and you just put it in your timesheet, right? I'm just referring to these meetings, official meetings for the project management that are dedicated for this and that you have funds for, you know, just to, we are not allowed to have double funding in that sense. But at home, yeah, perfect. Yeah, yeah, of course. Excuse me, I did. It is related to the intellectual output, but for the production of the intellectual output, you have all these 4 categories. So just once more, just to differ. So project management at the consortium level, at the project level, the, let's say, general project management, is funded through the project management and implementation budget line. This is this flat amount that we do not ask timesheets for, etc. On the other hand, when you have the budget line intellectual outputs, there you also have, between these 4 categories of stuff, you also dedicated the intellectual output management and administration. So some specific task that you will have to do, not for the overall administration and management, but for specific, yeah. You just have to justify it when you report it, when the time comes for reporting, that you did some specific administration and management of particular output, and that is fine. So you put it, you actually can get paid for that. Just it has to be diversified, that one is for the overall management and one is for the intellectual output. Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions regarding the time? Yeah, and one more thing which is important when you fill in your timesheets. So the timesheets, the days that you actually have declared on the timesheet, at the end have to be in line with the days in the mobility tool that will be filled in by the coordinator. Now, the catch is that the mobility tool does not accept decimal entries. You see, just whole numbers. So please have it in mind, because when you devise your timesheet, try to just declare your work in the whole numbers, because then you will have some, even if you had 4.4 or even 4.8 days, it will be in mobility tool reported as 4. So maybe you can have some kind of recalculations between the months just to pay all your work that you really done, but just do it in whole numbers, you know.
Tanya, if I may interrupt you, there is something which I also do not understand still. So there we have to fill the timesheet templates. I sent it once, and I will send it to you again. That's not a problem. And I understand it perfectly well. But we also have to, all of us, partner universities, also have to fill towards our university request for payment, and we also have to do it. And
Okay.
that template, I have some kind of the template, but it's not enough clear. So we have to do both, and they to be, how to say, in a compliance one with another.
Well, when it comes to internal reporting towards the university, this other template that you mentioned, we do not go into that. This is something which is the flexibility of the coordinator, and we are not.
My point.
Yeah.
My point is that all of us know that we have
Ah, okay, yeah. That you have two reporting, let's say, flows. Yeah.
two converging flows, and we will clarify that first to myself and then to all of us. But we will do that.
Yeah, this is something that university asked for.
To show the University of Belgrade how much I worked, or what is it about? I didn't get it that there are two flows. There's one flow at my university, of course, and then there's the flow with the EU or with the
All right.
national agency.
University of Belgrade is supposed to transfer money and then to get the confirmation report concerning that.
For instance, regarding to empirical survey tool that all of we have worked a bit before. So we have. Sorry, I think it doesn't work. Not this one.
We know which work.
There is a mobile.
Eda.
Sorry.
Just a second.
Sorry to be so persistent, but.
No, of course.
So, regarding to the empirical survey tool
All right.
that we have worked before coming, okay? We have different units. We have 3 units for administrative support staff.
Okay.
Well, 3 working days. 4 working days for management, and 5 working days for teachers, trainers, researchers, okay?
Okay.
Well, we have 2 researchers working on the tool before coming.
Okay.
And what can I do with this? One of them was working on the weekend, at the weekend, so we could justify by themselves. So how do? We put on the sheet, they work 2 days, 3 days,
Yeah.
and this is the proof.
Yeah, you just fill in your timesheet in accordance with what you have approved in the Annex 2. So just you had 3 days for administrative costs, and you have to justify 3 days. You can have, if somebody was working, you have 3 days in total.
Yeah.
So if it can be split among persons in reality, you know?
Yes.
So if some person has been working for the same kind of task, so both of them were working for the administrative task for the half days, you can have timesheet for the half day for one person and timesheet for the half day for the other person. It is just, for us, it is just to justify the type of costs. This is, in this case, for example, administrative unit costs, as approved in the annex. So, well, how you will divide it, it's not a problem. So it's flexible.
and
If you
at
if
the
you are
end-
referring to that, if I
Okay,
understood
and
you.
at the end, if I do not use all of them, I could use that funds at least at 20%
Yeah.
to other.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I would like just to interject for a second. Just to clarify once again, I don't think that we are all in agreement regarding the unit costs and how we justify the costs and how we report them. Please keep in mind that unit costs are intended for the institution, and you've declared a certain number of days for those unit costs. For instance, you can, we do not go into the level of payments that you pay for that unit. If the unit is 100 euros for you to work on something for a day, we do not go into details to see whether you paid the individual 100 euros for that. Yeah. You can make savings according to the institutional practice. So you can use those savings later to offset the issues that you have for some other travel costs, and maybe then transfer that and then fund it through the project. Well, of course, that's the institutional basis, of course. What's your practice at the institutional level, it's up to you. For instance, what you had to do for us, if you had 3 declared days for administrative staff, we had to see that through timesheets, that somebody was working for 3 days. We did not go into details whether that was 5 days in practice, or whether that was 2 persons. We need to see details for 1, because we cannot give you more than 3 days for that typical work, you know. So that's the flexibility that you have while working on the project, basically. So in these type of projects, strategic partnerships, capacity building, everything that's Erasmus-based, and it's unit cost-based, you have a type of double bookkeeping, basically. One for the commission, for the agency, and the other one for yourself. So basically, you justify for us the 3 days that you've been awarded in the Annex 2, but in practice, that could be 5 days that you divided, basically, between several persons to keep up because you maybe realize that you needed extra time, extra work, extra more details. That's the flexibility that you have. For us, it's important that just to see that in timesheets, for you to send it to the signed timesheets to the coordinator, for the coordinator then to put that on the beneficiary space and also through the mobility tool platform. And those two data has to be in line with each other. If you have 3 days, there has to be 3 days also in the mobility tool. That's the flexibility that you have in implementing your activities.
But in the timesheet, we need to describe all the activities we perform in that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you I don't know if you had a chance to check the timesheet that we.
I sent it, but this time I made mistake. I did not. Maybe I can
What
go
we
and make copy of that.
no problem. I think you will have the chance to see it later. What we did actually, just a second, yeah. What we did actually, we provided timesheet examples with filled-in timesheets, basically, for you to see. Okay, this is how I fill it in. This is what is needed from me to justify my time. Yeah, I'm sorry. Ms. Friedrich.
Maybe we should dedicate tomorrow half an hour to fill out the timesheet together. So because we just audited an Erasmus Plus project in Montenegro, and we know if there's something going wrong, then the complete project can be a mess. So at the end of the day, it's one of the crucial things we have to know how to do. So maybe that would be a good idea.
Had we known, we would have brought it with us and give it out to you, but Professor Vedinovic will probably share it with you tomorrow. I believe
I will bring it. Hard copy.
the copy that we have that we provided to Professor Vedinovic is actually filled in copy, with examples on what to write. It's quite easy, quite intuitive. It's not hard to do.
Other question, the timesheets, have they been supported at the end with payslips and contracts?
Contracts, yes. Contracts, yes. Payslips, no.
Could you repeat? Usually the auditor or the commission is asking for contracts of each person which is employed, which works in a project for the time when they work. And the second one is that they have to, in our case, they also wanted to see the pay slips.
Yeah.
Meaning this includes your human rights department usually, which takes you some time to provide that and so on and so on. So that's why I'm asking, because then we would try to already collect them during the lifetime of the project.
Yeah.
Let us just give you one piece of advice, though. We will not ask for payslips as the national agency. We will not ask for them. We will not check whether you provided payslips. However, well, this is a word of caution. The agency, after the completion of the project, reserves the right to pay you a visit to the coordinating institution and have a revision. And maybe, just maybe, they might ask the coordinator to show like an example there, like just to see whether there are some pay slips that they could be substantiated through the project activities. So that's the tricky part. That's like a Russian roulette a little bit from your side. We will not ask for them. However, the commission might. Let me give you, for instance, one example. This is a totally different type of project. It's a European-funded project, also the predecessor for Erasmus. They did not do their job correctly in terms of keeping all the records. The project was approved, the final report, everything was great, no issues. 4 years, 10 months later, the commission came to visit the auditor. And the auditor basically decided that there were not enough substantive evidence regarding the payments for individual people working on the project. And then they were asked to return up to 300,000 euros back to the commission.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. But they will not be doing, actually, that's what we said. They will not be going into the level of the level of spending on that payslip. Well, that's quite when you think about it, it's quite ironic. They don't care how much you gave out to the individual person working on the project, they just want to see the proof that that person received a certain amount for his or her work on the project, which is, it's not really a proof, but you see what I'm talking about, yeah.
Is it automatically audited at the end of the project lifetime?
No,
No.
no. That's why I said it's a Russian roulette, because you never know if you'll be the one chosen to be visited by the commission, by the auditor, because they use like a sample, so they come and visit certain projects. They don't go and visit every single project when it comes to the revision,
It's not like
It's not predetermined. It's not.
Because it's edited.
It's on. So it is not one of the new projects which are automatically audited at the end of the project lifetime, like it is now for most of the E+
No,
projects.
strategic partnerships are a bit different.
Okay, good. Then just
But
that
it might happen.
it might happen,
Yeah,
but
you
when
never
you know
know.
that it's
You never know.
automatically, then you may be
Yeah.
already collected in another way. So
For instance, capacity building project, that's typical for Montenegro, they're much bigger. They're up to 1 million. For them, audit is not only recommended, will not be provided by the commission, but also it's expected from the project team to have internal audit and external audit subcontracted. So external auditor who will be doing the audit on behalf of the project team. That's a
Budgeted
completely
through the
different.
project,
That's budgeted through the project, and it's forget about it. When it comes to strategic partnership, don't think about it. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
All right. So if there, no, of course. I hope that we clarify this part. If not, we will stay at the disposal after the meeting as well. But just to wrap up, we would maybe just like to stress two more things that were a bit of confusing to our beneficiaries. One is regarding the multiplier events. So these events that are connected to promotion of your project results, connected to intellectual outputs. These are events that are funded actually on the basis of the number of participants. So there is a fixed amount that the institution receives, not the individual person, but the institution receives for domestic participant and for the foreign participant at this dissemination, so-called multiplier events. So you actually, calculate how many persons you have at this meeting, and then you multiply it with the unit costs. And now this is important just to stress who can actually participate here. So you cannot, so everybody can participate, of course, but actually it is important to stress that persons who can be the basis for calculation of the budget for this event cannot be connected to the partner institution, which is full partner at the project. So, but again, have in mind that we see the university as a whole. So this means that your colleagues from another department, from another faculty, or even the students who are enrolled cannot be the basis for funding. The aim, the spirit of these events is to spread the news more than one institution. So actually think about in advance when you invite the people to have students, you can have students as well, but who are from another institution, the staff from another institution. Also, these associated partners here can be funded, their participants can be calculated for funding of this event. So yeah, yeah.
If I may interrupt you, so lunch will be instead of now in 10 minutes.
Yeah, we are wrapping up. We're wrapping up.
If there are questions, I believe that there are some more questions by our contacts. Please leave them
Yes.
these 10 minutes.
Yes, of course. We were just wrapping up. So this is just the note for the multiplier events. We found it important. And then just to note that these visual identity of the project is very important to use at all the publications from the project. This is something that Commission really stresses. So even part of the budget can be reduced because some publicly available materials were not, you know, marked with this. You have it here, the logo and the disclaimer of the European Commission. So just keep that in mind. So that is all from our side regarding the presentation. We wanted also to direct you to the existence of, as the coordinator Vojinovic said, to the University International Relations Office. I know that it is now a burden for you to give them some additional reports that we as the agency do not ask for, but on the other hand, they will be really helpful for you because they have experience in these kinds of projects. And even though we are available for the assistance in the moments when you cannot solve anything, something at the consortium level or at the institutional level, we are here, but unfortunately we cannot be there on a daily basis. But they can, you know, they are working on these projects and their experience, so try to collaborate with them because they will not just control you but also help you. And also we are at the disposal for all additional questions for the following 10 minutes that we have. Here, you're welcome.
I have some questions. The first, multiplayer events. You said that we have to consider a number of persons who do not belong to the university and to multiply for the unit cost.
Yeah.
What evidence about the number of persons? Are we obliged to give some evidence and how to make it?
Yeah.
And could I go on or do you want
of
to?
course.
The second question concerns unit cost. If I took the point, we consider writing for the book as a unit cost, but what about the survey? Do we have to consider just the time we spend for checking the results, also the time we spend for finding out persons to submit the questions, and then the time we spend for organizing whole?
Yeah.
And that's the second question. Okay, and maybe we might decide to send to the coordinator all contracts of the persons involved as a good practice in order to support, in case of check, the activities of the coordinator. That's my proposal. If we accept, we can establish this and we provide all activities.
Thank you for the questions. I will just not to forget to start from the last last sentence that you said. So the submission of the contracts is obligatory, actually. So this is something that every person that claims the budget from the project funds has to provide. So we have to have the proof of this formal link. So this timesheet and the results, the intellectual results, are the proofs for us. What is, discussed before is this payslips. They are not requested by us, but this would be a good thing, as Darko mentioned, to keep track from the beginning of the project, just in case of the revision. So, but contracts are not just a good practice, but the obligation. Yeah, and regarding the unit cost. Now I'm going backwards. Unit cost that you mentioned for actually, as I understood your description, your activities for finding the persons for
The platform.
yeah.
What about the platform? How can I consider work done for the platform?
Yeah, your platform.
If I contribute to create a platform,
Yeah, all the activities that just bring to the realization of the intellectual outputs, as described in your project application. So if your intellectual output is the platform, everything that you do to get to it is, to produce it, is funded through the intellectual output budget line, and you have these separate kinds of activities. So management, researcher, technician, maybe for the platform technician days you can claim. And it, like mentioned before, within one intellectual output, you claimed actually administrative managing costs, which you can use here. And the first question was about multiplier event, how you justify the participation. Yeah, now it is.
do not belong to the organizing university.
Yes, yes. You will have to have these kinds of lists for attendance lists. And since these are third parties, somebody who is not well connected to your institution, we advise that you have well, all the details about this institution, maybe even besides the signature, maybe even address of the sending institution. Yeah. Yes, yes, yeah. It is. Yes, the complete list, also the minutes of the meeting, the presentations that you had, everything that proves this event in this scope. And also what is the practice of the national agencies as well, and sometimes the obligation, is to pay a visit to your multiplier event. So it can happen that you have a staff from the NA, from the national agency, well, on the spot at your meeting, just to see how the meeting goes. Are there as many persons, etc. So this is how we track it. Yeah, thank you. Are there any more questions? Yes.
We don't know if we have to sign any kind of another contract different from the one we have with our university. I mean, we have, no.
No, no.
So which is the document we should have to sign to be linked to the project? Which is that document? We have a sample, we have something?
No, this is just a partnership agreement that you will sign at the level of the institution with the coordinator. Individuals do not sign anything except for the timesheets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have to submit your working contract, yeah.
And
To add something, because I have already had the experience of us from our faculty, the research team of our faculty. First, I have all working contracts of each member of the team. That's the first.
Okay.
And the bank account details. I have it also, yeah, of each. Okay. And the third, just bank accounts. Bank accounts.
But why?
Because they will be paid through, I don't know, because
I'm not sure.
that is what our financial administration has already had, and then we put that into the documentation. That was demanded by the university, I don't know why. So that's the second, but maybe that's not important. Third, all of us got the contract between University of Belgrade and us as the individuals to sign. And we have all those contracts signed.
The regular contract, the working contract you have.
We have working contract. No.
First, could you get extra money for the work you do in this project?
Yes.
That's the question, because, for example, Professor Gigerich, as a civil servant in Germany, is not allowed to get extra money. It's part of his usual work. Also, for us, it's really, really complicated to get extra money. I don't know how that is in Spain or Italy or somewhere else. But that's the question, because otherwise it's part of our usual working contract, what we have with the university. So why should we sign another contract?
In our case, we sign because all the activities will be paid, and that's the way how this obligation will be regulated. You also will do that, I think.
It depends on national legislation, because we have a labor contract, and then for some additional jobs.
Yes, we have, yes.
Separate contract,
Yes.
it's not a labor contract, it's
Kako se, Nikola, ugovor o autorskom i o delu i o autorskom honoraru, kako se to kaže na engleskom? We have two, for administrative workers, we have one type of the working, not working contracts for some extra payments, and for authors, for management and intellectual outputs, another type. I will show you. Vanya, you can bring it. Please bring it. No, but bring samples. You can bring, okay. So we have all of that already done. That's what I mentioned to all of you at one moment, and I sent to all of you samples of that.
It's a specificity of the Serbian legislation, basically. It's like a temporary service agreement. You have your basic contract, and you have this temporary service agreement for the additional work that you're doing. If it's administrative, then it's one way, and if you're the author of like intellectual output, it's another form of temporary service agreement that's the basis for the payment for your work.
But it's not obliged for us to do that.
No. It's nationally related to the Serbian legislation. Because otherwise it would be illegal to pay somebody, you know,
Okay.
an excess amount of funds that's not already prescribed in the contract. You know. Can maybe one more question.
One more question regarding the timesheets on research. Regarding the timesheets on research, we will see the example of already filled in timesheet, but are there some additional guidelines on this? What can we write in and what not? Some additional guidelines on the timesheet on research?
No, actually, we do not have the guidelines. Actually, the form is quite free. This is not just the pre-described form even. So you just need to think about what was promised in the project application and to be in line with that, with the research work that was within the application. You have descriptions of the work that is predicted for every intellectual output. So I suppose that you will be working on intellectual outputs, right? Yeah, so just refer to the application form and take a look what is there. These are the kind of activities that you will need to actually do through the project. And this is, you will see the example, and it will be helpful actually, so because we try to give different examples of different categories, so you will, I think that you will have the hint through this document. Welcome.
So maybe one more question. We're preventing you from going to lunch, so keep that in mind. Yeah.
Hear what was said today, not just to read the presentation. It was very good, but we could have also debate. So
Sure.
Yeah, of course.
So
Thank you.
OSCE is responsible for taping. I will ask them. And this PowerPoint presentation I will forward immediately today. And the timesheet I will send to all of you, and I will make hard copies. And now I'm inviting all of you for lunch here in the staff club.
Okay.
And then we will